calling from a 519 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sandy from Ontario.
Hi, Sandy. How are you? What's happening?
I'm good. Yeah. So last week you got a couple callers in from Canada wanting you to save us.
Well, yeah, we have our own problems here in the States.
Yeah, we have our problems up here too, housing included, because we have all the same housing crisis up here. And it's especially hard for people living with disabilities because our disability payments don't cover market rent anymore. So you're stuck where you're living, wherever you are. So if you're in an abusive situation with the landlord, with a partner, all that sort of stuff, you can't actually move. And you're forced to stay in those situations. And then if you are forced to move because you get reno-evicted or the landlord kicks you out for whatever reason, there's nowhere for you to go anywhere in the country where a disability check can cover the rent.
Oy.
So I actually just wanted to touch on what the callers were calling about last week, because they were kind of connected with the college crisis and rise of racism here in Canada. And the college issue is part public, part private, and issues for two different reasons. So the public colleges, especially here in Ontario, have really, really increased the amount of students that can come in, international students, partly because it's a money grab. They need as much money as they can because they're being underfunded by the Ford government, and that's on purpose, of course. And so you get this influx of students coming in without the proper infrastructure in place for these colleges to be able to cover them properly and support them the way that they need to be. Then you have the private colleges that some of them are just right out scams, offering fake enrollment letters and things of that sort. And they're literally sometimes just a storefront in a strip mall. And they'll have people come over, and then those students don't have the same supports that you would even get in a public college. So things like health insurance, which us Canadians don't tend to worry about too much, but they don't have that. So they have to actually get health insurance when they come over here. And then the cost of living explodes, so they might have to have a certain amount of money in order to come over here in the first place. But with the way the food prices have increased so drastically, the way the cost of living has increased so drastically, their budgets a few years ago don't match what's happening right now. So then there's a higher demand in food banks and things of that sort, which led to one food bank here in Ontario over the holidays rejecting any international student from getting food.
Right.
And so what's happening now is you have the conservative leaders that like to point at all these immigrants and international students and say they're the reason for the housing crisis. They're the reason for, high costs elsewhere, and we need to limit the amount of people that come in. And meanwhile, the Liberals are more than happy to have a whole bunch of newcomers come into the country because it's good in the headlines. Like we've had over 75,000 Syrians come in. There was over just about 1 million temporary emergency visas for Ukrainian refugees. And over 200,000 people have actually taken the government up on that. Even we have a program for refugees from Gaza. A whole 1,000 people can come over if they have family here that can, afford to keep them for a year. If they can get to the office, if they can, fill out all the biometrics, have a resume with all the jobs that they've had since they were 16 with their supervisors, be able to explain all injuries and scars on their body and hand over their social media accounts. Then they can come over.
Crazy.
And they're flexible on that cap of 1,000 people. So what you have is you have the Liberals using them like tokens and the Conservatives using them as scapegoats. And in the end, they suffer with both governments for different reasons. And because the Conservatives like to blame newcomers and stuff, racism is on the rise. Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, he isn't outright openly racist yet, but he is falling into the right-wing tropes of anti-trans talk. So he's been very public about, wanting to restrict trans women from where they can go and things of that sort. But then you also have other conservative leaders like Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, who she didn't invite Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson came on a speaking tour, and she invited herself up on stage with him to talk conspiracy theory and his fear of his wife seeing him out of the shower and laughing at him. which was actually in the speech, kind of disturbing.
I think I'll take a pass on that one.
Appreciate the honesty of
But
it.
yes, exactly. All right. Well, Sandy,
Yeah.
appreciate the update. People can check out Left a Box for more on this. When is your show regularly scheduled?
My next live stream will be tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube at Left of the Box.
Thanks so much for calling, Sandy.
Thanks, Andy.
Well, thank you so much for the shout out last week. I super appreciate it.
Anytime. All right, let's go. One more call. Calling from a 587 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Devin from Edmonton.
Devin from Edmonton. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to talk about the housing crisis, actually, if that's all right.
In Edmonton?
In Edmonton, in Canada, in everywhere. I think.
All right, be quick. We just did a couple of minutes on it. There's only so many that we can do about housing crises in various provinces in Canada on a Tuesday.
Well, that's legit because it really isn't the most exciting topic. I will agree with you. But I did want to thank you guys because a few years ago I was feeling very helpless and you inspired me to get more involved in the community. And it's kind of led me to this point where I'm fighting with the city right now, trying to get them to ban short-term rentals based on an experience that I had where a ghost hotel opened next door to my house. You guys know about ghost hotels, right?
What is it? Basically, just somebody buys the apartment or buys a whole building and just rents out the Airbnbs.
Yeah, so that's one form. But actually, I should be more clear. What happened was there was a bungalow next door, and a developer bought it and said that they were going to turn it into a duplex where the owner would live on one side and then they would rent the other side out to students. But what they actually did was turn it into a full-time Airbnb. And it's honestly, you guys, during COVID, what people would do would just rent it out for parties because the clubs weren't open. And we had a lot of like dangerous situations over here. And it's tough because it's like, you don't know who these people are. I've never met the owner because they just have like a property management group that looks after it. And so it got to a point where I had to start going to my counselor to get them to do something about it because the city wouldn't do anything about it directly. And then it made CBC, and finally Airbnb shut it down. But during this time, like this took 3 years for this to happen. Wow. So it was just like,
well, we're starting to see more regulation. I mean, New York City's got it, and
for sure,
and that's helpful. But appreciate the phone call.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, well, can I just say, the real issue is that what's happening in Canada right now is there's a push for massive deregulation of building new housing developments. So essentially creating more opportunities for these kinds of places. But councils, quote, housing advocates won't do anything about actually like things that'll help, like banning short-term rentals. So there's this real sort of tricky thing that's happening where they're saying we need more housing supply, which is what you guys say too. Right. But the real thing is, well, we need this more affordable housing supply because and I'm sorry to interrupt you guys, but like
I think I am of the mind that you can build more. It doesn't necessarily have to be regulated as affordable per se, as long as you have those regulations about, what you can build them for. In other words, there is,
exactly.
If you just build housing for market rates, even if it's supposedly luxury housing, depending on the location and what constitutes luxury, it's the more housing wherever it comes on the spectrum is going to drop prices as long as housing is built for people to live in it. Because there's and not as a fake hotel or some type of speculation. So
there was because that's what they fall back on.
All right,
because it's
appreciate the call.
Lucrative.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Thanks. Yes,
and thank you. Bye.
yeah, you can. I just wanted to add this because there was a bill introduced. I don't think it's really going anywhere, but late last year, called the End Hedge Fund Control of American Homes Act of 2023. It was proposed, I think, by Jeff Merkley in the Senate, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that. But Jeff Merkley. It's a big problem that these hedge funds and private equity companies are buying homes and housing by the dozens in certain cities and areas, and then they're selling them for a profit and or doing exactly what the caller described, using it as a rental property. And it should not be allowed. There's
a naive market, yes, in my backyard thing that I worry is going to swamp the need for a pretty strong state hand in guiding development and subsidizing it going forward.
I think you can do also after the fact, though, too. I mean, you don't need, like I say, you get them built and then put the regulation on.
Well, this bill also would say it requires hedge funds defined as corporations basically to sell off all single-family homes they own over a 10-year period and eventually prohibit such companies from owning any single-family homes at all.
It's just absurd.
Yeah.
Housing for people to live in.